Sing us the song of your people.
Howdy, welcome to this episode 20 of the Where Are We podcast. I am Orange Wolf or Zeph or Igmu Tonka, or I don't even know what my name is at this point. Here's the rest of the crew. Go ahead and introduce yourself, guys.
Hello there. I am Blaze. Good to be back again, as always.
You went out of alphabetical order.
Oh, I guess I go first.
Yes.
Blaze, you broke
It's
your own
right
rule.
there in the channel.
I'm a half-breed. I can do that.
Should we pick back up?
Yes, yas.
Yeah.
Yas.
Hi, I'm Bear X, Grumpy Grizzly. Just here for the ride.
Hey, I'm Blockpaws, the ever-questioning. Glad to be here.
Blue awoo who do awoo.
You did that very well. TA, that's your turn now. Cat, dude, attention.
What?
Yo, Stripes.
Cat.
Oh man, we've
He's
already
literally
plowed through the
ignoring
list.
me.
Wow. Oh, hi. My name is TA, Tiger Acolyte. Nice to meet you.
Nice to have you awake. Hello.
You just been through a natural disaster. Come on.
Oh, were you
Give him a break.
talking?
We're a whole 2 minutes into the recording, and we've already got so much blackmail material. How does this happen? So today we are doing a segment on role play in the Therian community. We are going to have a new special guest. Blaze, go ahead and take it on from there.
Joining us for this episode, we have Wolfwing. Go on ahead and say hi.
Hello, everybody.
How long you been around the community here, Wolf?
Definitely for about 2 years, but I've known about the community for about 18 to 20 years, but it didn't fit early on, and I've sort of come back to it now when I'm a little more mature-ish, and I feel like it kind of fits me more.
Cool. What are your Theria types?
I've got leopard and wedge-tail eagle.
That's an interesting combo. Cool.
Wait, hold on. So that you're not a wolf?
That's... Actually, I'll get into that when we get into role-playing.
Yeah.
Fair enough. There's a good... Well, that's a good segue right
It's
there.
going to be the starter pack.
Perfect.
Woo-hoo.
Gateway stereotype.
Yeah, there's a story to that. For this episode's topic, I was the one that put it on the table, and it got lots of interest because I've noticed in my observations of the community over the past couple of years that role play is not only handled very differently by different people and by different communities, but there's also a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings that go on that surround it. So after watching for a while, I kind of decided that this is probably a great topic for the podcast to look into. Over the past few months, the podcast crew has taken a series of questionnaires, turned them into polls, and posted them on several different Therian communities on Discord. They've been posted in the Therian Guide forums and a couple other places as well. And we combined that with our own observations to come up with the episode topic that you're listening to this evening.
Roll out the role play.
Roll out the role play.
Roll D20.
First thing we're going to look into is basically just a general discussion about each one of us. What are our personal experiences with role play as Therians? Let's just start with that.
So as I was alluding to before, I've been on the internet for about 4 or 5 years, but at that point, about 2000, I first bumped into furry stuff and got curious. I kept hearing about a place called Furry Muck, where people roleplay. Never ended up getting on there, but I ended up creating the persona Wolfwing, because I very much, at that point, was very much an eagle, and Transformers Beast Wars was on, and I saw the Transformer Silverbolt. It gave me an idea for a winged wolf character. That's where I sort of got the name, and ended up from there, got into Lion King Muck. It's all based around role-playing as animals. Got into leopard and lions and stuff, and it helped a bit, but not completely. I'm playing a character, it's not me.
So there was a little bit of a deeper underlying conflict there for you, eh?
Yeah, and a desire for more. And over the years, I've had friends, and we've done role plays where one of the ones I've done a few times is a fictional story about me. Like, what if I did turn into an eagle back when I first awoke as an eagle?
Hmm.
What if I was a shapeshifter? And just role playing myself and just trying to have an outlet. If I can't shapeshift in real life, do it as role play. Do it as a way to have me vicariously experience it as a role play story.
So when you first started role playing, you role played somewhat as a wolf. Did you have different feelings when you would role play as a wolf versus a feathered friend?
Definitely a bit at times.
Feelings of
And it definitely,
awesomeness.
yeah, a little bit. But when at times when I role play, I don't know if other people have it. Like when I played one of my line characters, it really felt like I was the character. Like I could understand what he was thinking and whatnot.
Like more than just getting into character, it's like becoming the character.
Yeah.
Cool.
Leopard was something that awoke after a lot of that role playing started to slow down a bit. Leopard wasn't till 2002, 2003 when it woke up. So I can't really say how much I've experienced with that, but definitely that. I've often thought I should change my name to Leopard Wing, but everybody knows me as Wolfwing, and it's like trying to legally change your name. It's such a headache. I don't know if I would want to change
Right.
my online name just because who's this Leopard Wing for 2 months or whatever.
I kind of relate to that because I've been calling myself Zephyr Nazumi since like 1999, 2000. The Nazumi really throws people off. They think that they're like, "Hey, are you a mouse stereotype?" No, I'm not, and I never have been. But it's my name, and I don't want to change it because that would just be weird.
Names are weird, especially online. I actually did change my name originally. I was Storm Redblood, and then changed it to Wolfwing. Like I said, once I found out about furry stuff, and I don't know if I completely couldn't call myself a furry, but it's close enough that it kind of fits.
Before you discovered the furry community and before you got into role playing and all that, did you have any weird experiences that you now look back on and go, huh, maybe that was the Therian thing?
Oh, definitely. And Eagle woke up around when I was 14 to 16, which would be late 80s, early 90s. Like looking back, I made nests out of my bed. It was sort of a weird thing that I did because in my head, I could turn into an animal if I did that. Like it was sort of this weird, how the kid's brain works.
Yeah. Oh, I totally get it. I was making dens out of the cushions of the couch and any blankets that I could get my paws on. And I would turn the big long L-shaped couch in the living room into this complex den with a big long narrow entrance and then a wide chamber. And I would always want to sleep in there. My mom got very frustrated. So I can relate.
Like I said, it was many years after that before Eagle woke up. But once last 5, 6 years, and I think with Blaze, I've done that in conversations where I start remembering things about the past that I've forgotten about or pushed to the sides. It's been interesting going back and looking at things that I did as a kid before Eagle woke up and just realizing, was that just being a kid or was that being because I'm a Therian
Yeah.
or something else?
Yeah, I hear you.
I actually think there's more than one sort of role playing because I know in my online discussions, I will occasionally pepper my use of language in such a way that I present myself not with the human body I am cursed with, but the ursine body I consider I have. So I will emote myself in online environments in that way, or use a bearish avatar in virtual reality. I don't know if that's really considered role playing so much as pushing myself into that space.
That actually ties perfectly in with the point that I was going to bring up a little bit later on. Part of the misunderstanding that I have observed in the communities revolving around roleplay is that, as you just said, there's more than one kind of roleplay and there's more than one reason for it.
Right.
One of the reasons why we do this, what appears to be roleplay, is for the exact reasons that you just described, and that we're trying to express ourselves.
Yeah, the role of my true self. I think of the balding, overweight, dorky human as the role I play from day to day, and the way I express myself online or here as who I actually am.
Mm-hmm.
So, in a way, I guess my daily self is the role that I'm playing.
We put on a mask to show our true face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I always consider it positive assertion rather than unrelated pretend. So, from the quote unquote outsider's perspective, I
Yeah.
definitely got that aspect of it.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to open the, the box of later conversation.
But that's okay. That's why we call this a semi-casual podcast. But anyways, so exactly where did your history with role playing begin, Bear?
I am a longtime dork, and so I had older cousins who played Advanced Dungeons and Dragons back in like 1979, 1980. And of course, I'm this 6, 7-year-old cub running around that couldn't play it with my late teen cousins because they were playing a much more adult version of the game. But I would sit and look through the books, and I always thought, these books are great, whatever. But I didn't really associate the books with anything other than the game. And around that same time, late 70s, early 80s, was when I started experiencing non-human feelings. The only thing I had as a touchstone was the werewolf, because in our Western culture, that is the fusion of man and animal. That is the point on the horizon that we end up looking at when we think about shapeshifters for the most part at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I think people have a broader vision now than they did, but at that point, like if you were exposed to shape changers, they were werewolves.
And that's the origin of the term where it still floats around in the community.
Oh, sure. It's the reason why mental shifts are shifting in the first place because of AHWW. I felt like I was big and two-legged and stuff, and so I thought the only thing that could be is a werewolf, because I'm thinking like the Howling, right? I mean, that's how my little kid brain was looking at it. And as I got a little older, I had a peer group and they got interested in Dungeons and Dragons and stuff, and I was reintroduced to the books. And as I was flipping through the section on lycanthropes, I saw that they had were-tiger, were-bear, were-rat, and I was like, oh man, there are more types. It sort of opened my mind to the idea that I should explore other things than werewolf. I should try to match this feeling to other things. And it allowed me the freedom to realize bear. And I explored those feelings through characters that I played in playing Dungeons and Dragons. You know, it's I want to play a werewolf character, and then later it's like I want to play a werebear character.
Right.
And dungeon masters at the time weren't typically as open to letting you play those kind of characters. They're like, "Oh, game balance," but it's like I'm not going to abuse the game balance. It's not about min-maxing or power playing, but about giving myself a chance to explore these feelings that I have in a safe environment.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where my background with it. And of course, later on, I did play around on Furry Muck, and I played around in some of the talkers and things like that in the late 90s. And I did the same thing. You know, it has always been a way to explore how I felt inside.
Cool.
Bear, I've got a lot I share with that. In fact, one of the reasons I still engage in RPGs today is for that similar reason, is it allows me to explore myself in a safe space. Or if anyone questions it, I can say, "Oh, I'm just playing around. Don't worry about it." It's a good medium for self-exploration.
Yeah,
That's
honestly,
why
I would
like
still be
RPGs.
actively doing tabletop role play, but the people who I played with have either moved away or got married and lost interest or whatever. And these days I don't have enough time, but I would love to get back into it.
There's always the online aspect of it. You know, if you want to pay a little bit, you can get into a random group and things like that. But I think we have a big enough community that we could potentially draw on that to set up a reasonable
that's
one.
fair, but there's nothing like throwing a handful of dice with buddies around a table,
I
you know?
fully agree with that, absolutely.
Yeah, there's a certain tangibility to that that doesn't exist online.
Yeah. Now, VR is definitely getting close. And I think the fact that you can don an avatar that is custom made to match how you feel in your own mind is, I think, as that technology improves, I think it is going to be extremely helpful, especially for people who deal with species dysphoria, to be able to explore those feelings again in an environment where it's acceptable to do so, because no one looks twice at a person with an animal avatar.
Well, some of them look twice, but, you know.
Well, all right. They
Oh, God,
accuse
it's a
you of
furry.
being a furry.
Which is fine.
Yeah, that's fine. Please accuse me of being a furry. That's fine. I don't mind.
Again, the VR thing is kind of bridging that faded out line between role play and self-expression.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a transhumanist thing, right? The whole idea of embracing technology to expand what we consider the human experience. And I have always maintained that being otherkin or being Therian is a normal, natural part of some subset of humans. It is part of the human experience and has always been.
I might as well jump in with my, well, somewhat limited history of experience with role play. I've talked a little bit about how my earlier childhood and early teens were pretty much dominated by logic. I was a geek too, in my own way, an introverted geek. I fixated on specific topics, and that's all I wanted to think about, read about, anything. As I got older and I crept towards the days of my Therian awakening, by then, of course, I'd been exposed to lots of kids around me that wanted to role play, they wanted to play video games and the stuff like. And what I've found interesting about me is, even to this point, up to today, I can't really get into role playing another character unless I can be the character. So if the character doesn't match who I am, it's not going to fly. And for that reason, I really never got into role play games, the tabletop versions. I never have played video games. It's just not my thing. The only reason that I will quote unquote role play is for the non traditional reasons that we've been talking a little bit about already, in terms of expressing who I really am on the inside by some external means. In this case, I do a lot of that kind of self expression in chats where I will emote things like a tail wag and all sorts of different canine expressions. And that helps me feel comfortable. It makes me feel like I can be myself and be accepted for who I really am. But from an outsider's perspective looking in, potentially they can't tell the difference between that and conventional role play. The only other point worth mentioning from my history is that the Werewolf, the Apocalypse reference manuals were like my go-to Bible for helping to sort out a bunch of different experiences that I was having on an internal level. It just suddenly crystallized all these formerly detached Therian ideas and experiences that I was having, but I didn't have any words for or any framework for them. But when I read those books, I was like, yes, that's who I am.
It is uncanny how much they get it for being completely unaware of the Therian community.
You really think they're unaware?
At the time, they would have been. 92 was when Werewolf the Apocalypse came out.
Doesn't mean that means that there weren't people who were in the inside who were feeling and dealing with this stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
You can definitely smell the Therian signature in the way the information was organized and presented. But equally, if not greater importance, you can see the research into real shape-shifting spiritual practices that they did in order to build the entire world. I never have actually sat down and played a game of that, but it nevertheless remained a touchstone of understanding for me in terms of giving my experiences some context so that I can communicate about them.
It gives you a vocabulary, which can then be a common vocabulary. It's not something you created unto your own self, which is important.
Exactly.
Although I have to admit, cringing deeply whenever someone would have shown up on AHWW and described themselves as Guru.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, there's a line there between where you start to get into like, okay, you're plagiarizing. Stop it.
Well, I
Exactly.
think that the plagiarization is an important point, to make, but at the same time, for people who are especially younger or learning about themselves and exploring, that type of touchstone is really important to be able to give a framing and a grounding to it. So yes, I agree with the plagiarization as if it continues on for like 5, 6, 7 years. Yeah, you got a problem there. You're just kind of tapping into it. But if it's something that here's my paw in the ground and I'm evolving from there and I'm showing evolution, that's a totally different story in my opinion.
It's very helpful to know that other people identify or relate to the experience at least enough for there to be a word for it also, even if it doesn't like 100% encapsulate what you personally are. It still gives you that direction. It's unfortunate, but sometimes people try too hard to make their identity into the thing that they have found instead of using it as like a trail of breadcrumbs toward the truth about themselves. But it's an individual thing.
You know, you saw that in grilling. When grilling was a really popular practice, you would see where people had kind of memorized the right answers and then would just regurgitate the right answers in order to get past the gatekeepers for whichever particular subset of the community they had found themselves.
Copy paster, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I admit, in my early teens, and because I went to college a little bit early, I was still doing touchstones into fiction and things like that were more partially in the pop culture. I'm not going to go into that right now because I've evolved.
Actually, you might as well, since you're talking about your own role play experience.
I'm not going to go into the details of that history because it goes into some areas that I put behind me for a reason, and some of them are very painful. But at the same time, it was a good foundation at that time and try to map and understand oneself. That was a piece of the role play absolutely for me. And I've got a sticky note of notes here because what we've talked about, like Furry Muck Vertopia in the mid to late 90s, I remember those. I remember the first time getting on there, I was saying it in the general chat, was my first experience with wolves and found them to be the most pompous assholes I've ever met. And
Preach.
said, what the
every day
do these guys think they are? Obviously, it just fits now. It just works. And that's just kind of an entertaining aspect of it for me to look back at. Blaze, you were talking about like role play with things you understand, things you resonate with. A very good friend of mine, before fursuiting was a thing, when it was just mascotting, truly mascotting through the 70s and 80s and early 90s, they did a lot of mascotting. They made a lot of money doing mascotting too, working for a radio station. And they had a connection always to the mascot. And then that radio station reevaluated and said, you know what? Yeah, this just isn't what we want to do. It's just not the market that we want to be in anymore. We're going to change up what we're doing here. And they revisited and they kind of went this country western aspect of it, which music-wise he didn't mind. But they brought in an eagle as the mascot and said, you've been doing this mascotting for us for so long, do the eagle. And he's like, no. And it's like, but it's just a mascot. And he's like, no, it's not just a mascot to me. I have a connection to these other critters that you guys have done. And he actually backed out of it despite a very lucrative deal. And I think that speaks to, that. And I would agree with that. That's, for me, similar. If I'm going to play a character, I've got to have a connection to that character. So, obviously, where wolf, where critter in general is very easy. Just step right into and just be able to play. Because it's got that hominid aspect of it, and it's got that critter aspect of it. And then, obviously, some are easier than others. But I can't do like a paladin or something like that if you want to go to the D&D route. It doesn't resonate with me. I can't.
That definitely sounds familiar. I think I've mentioned this in a previous context, but if I ever got into the furry community, I cannot imagine my persona being a fox because the context and the purposes feel so totally different to me that feel not necessarily wrong to me, but at the very least, really, really weird.
Mm-hmm.
I think I heard a lot of that in what you were saying just now.
Yeah, it's the same thing for me. I need something to latch onto. I need something to ground myself to that if I'm going to do the RP aspect of it too. And I've enjoyed RP. I've done plenty of Dungeons and Dragons. I've done plenty of other RPs. I've done, obviously Furry Muck and related back in the day. There's an aspect of it that I enjoy, but it always has to have something that I can come back to that resonates with me on a deep level to make me say yes. And as I said earlier, it's putting the mask on to show our true face. I really do stand by that, and I've explained that to a few people who didn't understand therianthropy, and I was like, this is really what it is in a lot of ways, and it was like, oh, that's a little weird, but I can see that. And once they saw me in that light, it was like, oh, I see all these little threads that are blatantly obvious once you're aware of them. But before that, it was like either a quirk or something they dismissed and framed in a totally different way, which was based on their context of what they understood at the time, whereas I was able to open their mind and perspective to a different perspective. I've personally been playing around with VR too. It's really interesting. I love the aspect of it. I'm actually getting full body trackers, hopefully in November, the slime trackers. I'm going to try them out and see where that can lead, if that helps with some of the aspects of dysphoria that I deal with. I don't deal with as strongly as other people here, and definitely not as strongly as other people in the community because I'm pretty integrated. But I enjoy that aspect of it, to be able to look, to visualize yourself is, this is what I am. It feels right. When you look at it in the mirror, it just feels right.
I'm looking forward to exploring VR when it finally starts getting advanced enough to the point where it's convincing. And even aside from that, I'm also looking forward to finally having a full body suit that truly expresses who I am on the inside. And it's, again, for the same reasons. It's not a role play even to me. It's self-expression.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And for me, like the full body suit, well, I would love one. Can I tell you the details of that visualization of myself in a way that would come across adequately? I can't. I can tell you generals. I can't tell you the details that would make me be like, yes, this is it, and therefore justify spending that level of money on it. But that's me personally. I have a struggle with that. It's frustrating. Since we touched on the World of Darkness stuff too, seeing those threads through all that, I agree with that. One of the other people, and I think I mentioned it before, that I swear has to have had a Therian friend is Terry Pratchett. If you read some of his books, especially in the Watch series with Angua, there are the struggles and the idiosyncrasies and everything that character embodies and deals with through her evolution, and then the family that she has, because he has such a rich world. It is so. It is definitely a layer on top of it of the sarcasm, of the humor, and all that stuff. But if you look underneath that veneer, there is something that is that fundamental struggle that we all deal with, that I think he has captured so beautifully, is the true character underneath the surface there. And that, like, for a wolf, it's easy for us to project that leadership, that certainty, and everything like that. We're a neurotic mess underneath the surface if you actually get to know us. And, we have all sorts of problems that we won't ever let on. But I think that he captured that beautifully in that situation. So if anyone has not read it, anything in the Watch series, really starting with Men at Arms, that's where she comes in. And that, I think that it captures such a beautiful aspect of that. To me, it's really enjoyable. But anyways, I'll stop there and let somebody else talk.
Black Paws, Blue, either of you have anything else to add to what you said about your history with roleplay so far before we move on?
Just emphasizing what I said before, looking back on it. I mean, I know I first found about it early days of the internet, and it might seem frivolous to some people, but I think I really did get the sense early on, interacting with folks on like IRC and stuff, that this was a big deal, that this had a weight to it other than just let's pretend in practically any other circumstance. And nobody ever told me this, but I think knowing some of the stories and stuff, and seeing some of the conversations, that it did I did get it on some level, to the point where changing that about my own emoting on IRC was a really, really big deal.
Mm-hmm.
I knew what D&D was. It wasn't something I was really into, so I didn't have the background of directly participating in the sort of just for fun mode of it. I mean, maybe if I'd known or been part of the furry community, before that, it might have been different. But in my mind, something serious, something with weight to it. So I guess sort of approaching it, or starting out with it from that angle. I'm not sure how, but I'm sure it has, affected my general perspective and attitude towards it.
Makes sense.
It does make sense, and I agree with several points that you made there. Yeah, and to me, I got to toy around with it. I mean, obviously, I grew up during the time when the Satanic Panic and everything happened, and there definitely was concerns around that within the household, and that's ill, and don't do that. And we still did some on the side, anyways. It was something we got to deal with, but it was really getting into college and truly coming of age, going through that 17, 18, 19, 20 range, that it became more solidified for me, where I was like, this is a way I can express myself and show me, my true nature. Looking back at some of those things, I cringe, as we all do, but I think it was an important aspect of it, and I feel it is very healthy for us to be able to, as Therians especially, express these aspects of it, because oftentimes our professional life doesn't allow us to bring our whole selves to work. Sometimes even in our personal life, we have struggles with that and showing our true nature for fear of rejection in a lot of cases too. Those are things that I still struggle with to a certain degree myself, definitely in my professional life. But it's a nice release and relief to be able to do that and enjoy that.
EA,
so.
You awake?
Yes.
You want to pipe up and tell us a bit more about your history of role playing and how it ties in Theriantropy?
Yes. Oh, yes. Broadly speaking, role playing has sort of been a part of my life since I was like 3 or 4. I was always role playing as animals in recess time, and in fact, one of my highlights of my day during that time was, what kind of creature am I going to put my shoes in this time? And really enjoyed that. But as it relates to sort of the more online arena, or the theater of the mind arena, role playing came around as early as like 8. You got that their internet's running. You got introduced to RP chat rooms. Animal role playing in that arena didn't really start coming around until 13, and it was then that I was more starting to do some exploring of myself. Now, at that time, I didn't really think I was an animal, but I just know I had a really strong connection to tigers at that time. Even though I didn't know I was an animal, it felt really good to role play as a tiger in a lot of situations. I tried other animals too, just because why not? It's fun. But there was always a certain something where being able to role play as that animal in this theater of the mind where anything goes brought a sense of peace, I guess, because it's something I'd never be able to do in real life. And at that time, I didn't know what else was going on. But in more modern times, where I'm just role playing around as like a tiger in Discord and stuff and various forums, it's a way to stretch my limbs, as a manner of speaking. Because the human body can only do so much, and being able to forget you're in a human body, even just for a couple seconds, is a very nice icy hot on a sore wound. Relating to like RPGs and stuff, like I was saying with Bear, when I got into D&D and stuff earlier, it was more of, okay, are you going to let me be like a tiger or something? No, I'm not interested then. It was exploratory stuff. Even before there was this whole, I even knew like Therians were a thing. It allowed me to reach out into another body that felt more comfortable. And to this day, I still generally turn down RPGs that say no tigers, Sorry, even if they're like, oh yeah, werewolves, I'm like, no, that's just not me. It's sort of similar to that whole like what Blue said. If you don't have a connection to the character, then what's the point?
Oh, that's interesting. That's actually kind of a common tie that we've all had in our discussion so far.
Yeah, I mean, there was a couple characters I played just for funsies. Like one was a bunch of mechs. I love mechs, and he was obsessed with explosives. That was pretty fun to play, but I didn't really get to play with the character. It was just a set piece to play with explosives and mechs. Same with like 40K. I don't really get into my character. It's just being immersed in the 40K that I enjoy. It's the characters that allow me to be like a tiger, where I really start to play with the character and their development that I really get attached to.
Roger that. All right. Well, last but not least, Zeph.
I'll try not to babble too much about my own experience because I'm sure I've already said it over like a lot of the other podcast episodes too. But same kind of case as TA. Like at the age of a few years old, I was already emulating animal behavior, and it just seemed like a natural kind of expression for me. And I do think that there were some situations where it wasn't always feline or something like that. But I think back then I just had a very high intrigue in animals in general. So trying to emulate them and understanding how they saw the world. There were sometimes where I was like, hey, I wonder how a bug actually sees the world. So I would put my head on the ground and look around, and I'm like, wow, it must be big. So like I'm not sure if that counts as role playing in a sense. And I guess that's one of the topics we'll probably get into also, is like what exactly is role playing. But even from that very young age, emulating things, I guess technically that could fit into that same category. Same sort of situation where like I looked forward to recess because typically we were running around being animals or something like that. I was huge into role playing, even things like Sonic. I love to run around a lot, so I liked being Sonic sometimes. But one of the things that was interesting is that as we got older and moved through the grades, less people were interested in doing that kind of stuff. But to me, it was like, hey, why are you guys not interested in these kinds of activities anymore? Because it seems like it's just a part of me. It doesn't seem like it's something that I'm pretending or something like that. It's just it's something that feels fulfilling to me. Fast forward, I kept away from things like D&D for a long time because being told that D&D was the devil and stuff like that too, whatever. But when I was later teens, I started getting that curiosity in there, and I'm like, hey, okay, this is kind of cool. You could be different kinds of animals and things like that too. And I thought it was kind of cool and started pursuing it at that point. Around that same time was probably when I found the furry fandom, and again, I didn't know exactly what I was at that point. I didn't have internet access until I was like 17 or 18, at least not consistently. I think Wolfwing said earlier on, furry was kind of a gateway drug for me because it's the closest thing that I saw to Therian that I could identify with. So I kind of had that little bit of a segue too, and started doing, I don't know if furry muck is technically what I'd like invested in at that time, but Yahoo chat rooms and things like that too, just going around and expressing myself as a creature. I had that going on too. For me, most of the role playing was more about self expression, and especially like when it was a big thing when I found those online text chat rooms, because as someone with like tremendous social anxiety and someone who didn't like talking and things like that either, being able to verbally role play, like put an asterisk, say an action, put an asterisk, it felt like a very comfortable way for me to communicate actions that I would normally do, or express things that express ideas that I wanted to get across that I didn't feel comfortable vocalizing in a sense. And a lot of the ways that I would portray myself were ways that were kind of how an animal would non-verbally communicate itself. Kind of had that route too. I definitely agree that as far as like role-playing games and things like that, if there is a tiger of some sort in there, that's probably the character I'm going to be. If there's not, there's a chance that I just might not be interested. Depends on the game, the plot, things like that too, of course. So it's not like 100% hit or miss thing, but like when I played EverQuest, I didn't mind being like other classes or other species too, but I never wanted to be like the normie human in something if I could handle it or if I could make that decision. It just didn't feel right to me. Like part of it wasn't as exciting to be a character that was just human, but it also felt like I wasn't really expressing myself in a way, I guess really in a sense, portraying myself as an animal in some way, shape, or form gave me that sense of euphoria and did combat some degree of that dysphoria. And I didn't even have the words for, I didn't know dysphoria was even a thing back then. But likely the attraction to role playing in the various forms is because it felt natural to me.
Very well. It's really interesting how so far the same common thread has been running through pretty much everybody's story, in that for a Therian, role playing is really something quite different from the conventional idea of what it's all about. And this is exactly why we wanted to put this episode together, to make it very clear that active, open discussions need to be had about this. Because a lot of the times when we Therians enter a community space that includes other non-Therians, Therians are trying to express themselves as getting misinterpreted as role-playing that's going on inappropriately. I find it really interesting that everybody has so naturally tied in the same common theme, that for us, it's not really pretending at all, it's self-expression. Now, looking at all the different experiences that Therians have with roleplay and what so far from that perspective, I think just having that awareness would solve a lot of communication problems.
I think I agree there too, because in the Therians that I've seen, even in the Therian community, the people who seem off put by role playing, like if you go into a chat and you see people using emotes and things like that too, some people get frustrated because they think it's some kind of like nonsensical goofiness, and I think they don't realize that it's literally just the person trying to be expressive in that same way that you were just mentioning.
We've got some poll results that actually kind of speak directly to this. One of the communities, Discord communities, that we posted this poll on a while back is Therian Territory. But it's interesting to note that the name Therian Territory is kind of a little bit of a misnomer, because it's not actually a Therian only space, it's an alter-human space. And there's a lot of furries there. There's a lot of other kin there. There's, it's more a broad umbrella community than just a strictly Therian only community. And that was one of the main reasons why I wanted to target that place to get responses. And what I find interesting is that in the poll responses, nearly half of them say they don't role play at all, period, end of list. And yet of the remaining half, fully half of them clearly indicate that they do it as self-expression. And yet when you look at the results from a Therian only space, it's almost entirely about self-expression. So I think that really speaks to the importance of people being aware of this distinction being made clear as to why this action is going on. Anybody else want to, let's do a kind of a round table-ish thing here. Anybody throw in anything that they want to about the topic so far?
Yeah, actually, what Zeph said about like him growing up and then his friends being not interested anymore, I faced much of the same thing. It was kind of perplexing, like, well, hey, you were having fun with me before, why don't you want to continue doing this? And I just kind of, without anyone saying anything, I just kind of picked up like, oh, okay, people see that as childish now. Okay, I'll just stuff this away.
What was interesting was I would still do it on my own when no one else was around, like because again, it was for me, it was a part of my self-expression. So it felt weird for me because it really was a sort of repression at that point. And going into sort of a different topic and not want to tangent too much, but it's like around that same time when people became less interested in doing those sorts of role-playing things, there was some kind of social phenomenon that they were clued in on that I completely missed myself and didn't know how to naturally get in sync with. So that was just really frustrating as a kid to try to figure out.
I would agree with that too, and I think that to me, I was just oblivious to it, honestly, for several years as it continued to evolve around me. So that it made it awkward in some ways, but then eventually people just kind of like, okay, that's just how he is, I guess.
It's funny, I do a lot of role playing, but the actual role playing as myself in chat and whatnot is very contingent on when my animals are awake. The more I feel my animal, especially leopard, I make purring, I start stretching out, posing in the chats what I'm feeling at the moment.
I've seen some people who will do the same kind of thing. Like they'll be in a conversation and then they'll do asterisk per asterisk. For them, that's the extent of the role playing that they do in a sense. Some of those individuals, I've asked them like, well, how do you feel about people who role play? And they're like, oh, I don't like it. I don't like seeing it, and I don't like doing it myself. But technically to me, it's still kind of role playing that they're doing that. Like they're doing the emote. Again, I think for many Therians, it's just a natural way of communicating that, hey, I am kind of in this shifty headspace or whatnot right now, or I would like to communicate to you in an animalistic way. It just seems natural to me, but I don't think people have clear definitions as far as like what actually constitutes as role play. When is it role play? When is it not? If someone just does like a little emote they stretch, is that role playing, or does it have to be like a full on sentence? The definition seems to vary by people.
You just perfectly exemplified a situation where misunderstandings occur on a regular basis, I'm sure. And for every one situation where a misunderstanding occurs and it's brought to parties' attention and so they're involved, there'll be 9 out of 10 situations where nothing is said about it. Just assumptions are being made. And that can be potentially damaging.
Partly off topic, but anybody else hate that over the last couple of years, asterisks is now mean italics, and you can no longer emote with asterisks as easily?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I just mentioned on the same subject, I remember using carrots at some point.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yes, I remember those.
Yeah, I think that's how I started, and then I went to the asterisk because everybody else was doing it, and it was just easier to find on a keyboard than carrots. And even that's hit or miss these days because of HTML. I definitely understand where you're coming from. I've had moments like that recently.
And the way Discord feels like IRC, so I find myself connecting to the muscle memory of IRC, and I'll be like, /me did this, or /message, and then it's like, no, wait, I have to use the mouse.
Right.
Autopilot.
I remember a friend of mine ran a BBS so long ago, and they used parentheses for emotes.
I was extra special cringy, and I used like brackets for mine, like the little square brackets on both sides, just because no one else used them.
Right, yeah.
Well, aren't you just special?
Well, talking about that, like I don't know if any of you guys ever seen me do it, but if I ever do colon or say in message, that's because I was on a muck chatting, and then those are the commands to tell you to say stuff.
I forgot about that.
I'll just randomly say hello, what's up, and I'll say, and the word say is at the front of the sentence. Because I'm in that mindset.
I forgot about that. Wow. Been so long sipping on a muck.
These days, I'm mostly just on there to chat with a few friends that are still around.
We started with like a bullet point, and so I want to make sure that everyone feels like they have communicated if they wanted to. Again, to the full extent, what is your personal experience with role play? Why do you do it? How does it all tie in? Like, if you have any other things you can add in that maybe we haven't discussed already before we move on?
I was surprised by how fluidly and how succinctly everybody jumped in and answered all 3 questions at the same fucking time.
Yeah.
It worked well.
I'm just going to point out that a wolf dog is running this, not a cat. I think there's more merit to that than anything else.
Ooh, there had to be one poke.
Oh, what's that? I wasn't listening. Sorry, I'm making this storm go further north. Yeah, sorry. What was that?
Oh, since you brought
I'm
it
inland
up,
enough. I'm good.
we will, for an official disclaimer, officially state that we did try to warn Zeph about storm calling during storm season, and
It didn't
it
work.
didn't work.
I'm not getting into it, but Blue, you did not help things last weekend. That's all I'm going to say.
I merely honored a spirit. That's all I did.
Yeah, and would the spirit not?
You were going to dishonor him and piss them off.
I was not.
Bold.
I was already messing with people, so that should not have dishonored or irritated that particular spirit. But anyway.
Oh yeah, right. I merely tried to ensure that we honored that particular spirit appropriately.
Thanks for doing that right before, tropical storm hits.
I didn't start it, but I was sure he's going to finish it, so we didn't make it worse.
I'm calling shenanigans. At any rate, yeah, does anyone else have anything to say on this subject?
I didn't bring up that spirit. Zeph
I
did.
miss doing like tabletop things. I didn't really talk about my experience with tabletopping much this episode, but like being able to act out like physically around other people too and not have them judge you for it because it's part of a game or something like that too, it's really euphoric in a whole bunch of levels. For some reason, me quote unquote acting out a character in a campaign helps me override my social anxiety, and I've not figured that out. You kind of get to express yourself in ways that maybe aren't normally quote unquote socially acceptable, which is pretty cool. So it's okay to be a little weird and do cat things. And
I definitely agree with one of the last D&D campaigns I did. I played a Kitsune druid,
Woohoo.
and my entire
He's not a fox.
campaign, I was either a fox or a dire tiger. The entire time, it was like I was only human if I had to do something that required digits. Like I had ability to use body parts to do semantic or the hand gestures. Half my feats were just so I could play a tiger to cast spells.
When Skyrim came out and the modding community bursted out with mods for the werewolf questline, and then they added the ability to use werebear, I pretty much just modded the heck out of the game so I could just stay in that form the whole time. It really, that's what happens.
It is. I'm going to speak as a GM, DM, whatever you want to call us. DM has a different connotation to it, so I'll say GM. It's fun to be able to play all the NPCs and be able to do that, though I far personally prefer doing the character and doing the RP on that because you can develop that character so deep and have so many interesting little quirks and fun with it and get the entire party to start like groaning when certain things start like, oh, here we go, this is going to happen now. It's like, yes, it is.
I don't know if it quite counts as role playing, but one thing I'll do is any game I play, if there's an animal option, doesn't have to be cat, wolf, or bird. If there's an animal option, I will almost always choose it. Doesn't matter if it's the worst character in the game, as long as it's playable, I will.
same here.
For Final Fantasy 11 and 14, I played the Nico, even though they're only female, at least at the start. But it's like, cat, I have to play it.
Yeah, same here.
I think someone brought this up earlier, but it's like I play a human 24/7. Why would I want to like when I'm playing a game or something like that? I don't want to play a human anymore.
Yep.
I love the idea of that some other GMs have thrown around, and people are on certain groups in Facebook, they'd probably be familiar with it. Party comes in oblivious. They don't know anything about their character. They're assigned a character, but they don't know anything about it. So as the play evolves, you learn like, what hits, therefore your strength is going to be this. Or you saved on this dexterity saving throw, or you got a +3 or something like that, then obviously your dex is going to be in this range. Things like that. But you also don't know your species. So the opening line isn't like you walk into a bar because everyone has to walk into a bar in D&D to start this, and barkeeper says, "Oh, Dragonborn are a little bit unusual in this part." Wait a minute, I'm a Dragonborn? You could have so much fun with that. How to torture people. Or make them empathize with Therians. One of the two. You're a tabaxi.
How do you all feel when, like, people who are not Therians are role-playing as animals? And it's more of just a fun thing or not something that they necessarily connect to personally.
To me, I'm good with that because it generates an empathy and they can at least frame themselves through that RP to some of what we're dealing with. Maybe it's not comprehensive, but at least it's a claw in the crack to be able to start to open that door. And I think it's a positive thing myself over time.
Claw in the crack.
Yep. You're going to the dirty spots, not me.
Yeah, I was going to say, pull your brain out the gutter.
What kind of role play is this? Ooh.
Yeah, I 100% agree with Blue. That if it's a mainstreamer who is playing an animal character in role playing, I think it's great because it gives them that opportunity to explore that headspace. Now, if it's a Therian playing that, and especially if they're playing a bear, I'm watching. That's neither here nor there. Got to protect the brand.
Like I said before, it would feel different to me, I think, the intent and the thinking behind it. So it would strike me as completely different things, just like I said earlier about what I'd probably do if I were in the furry fandom. Like I said, it's sort of an instinctual thing. I don't know if I could describe the difference if I tried, but because they're so fundamentally different to me, I think I wouldn't sort of draw the connection. So I don't think I'd feel offended or anything like that.
One thing I find myself with, and it's something I'm working on, but sometimes when I see Therians roleplay a little too strongly, there's that old school sort of worry about, is this person a Therian or are they trying too hard to be a Therian? Is it? I don't want to judge somebody because I've been judged in the past, but it's sort of that in the back of my head, that's sort of in my mind.
And it's interesting because sometimes it's because, again, it seems like a pretty big chunk of the Therian community can be very socially awkward. Sometimes people don't know how to interact or to what degree they should be interacting with. So I think some people do go a little over the top simply because they don't know, like, to what degree they should be doing things. I kind of take that in a case by case sort of way. I try not to judge too much. You can kind of tell after a while how genuine someone is. But I think sometimes in those cases, people just don't realize that they don't need to be as over the top while they're doing it. They may just be sussing out their own self-expression too. I mentioned that, like, I didn't like to talk a lot and things like that when I was a teenager. So I probably actually went over the top with some of my role play stuff too when I first started doing it. It's a learning curve.
It's a learning curve.
Yeah, there's definitely an experience factor to it. After a while, you kind of get a feel for what is genuine self-expression and what is just pretension. And to answer your original question, Zeph, how do I react around role-playing? Honestly, I don't like it at all. It turns me right off. If I need to have that door already open and understand that the people around me are also Therian and they're doing it for the same reason. Otherwise, I'm out. I want nothing to do with it. I never have liked role play. It almost borderlines on offensive to me. So, yeah, for me, it's 100% all about self-expression. I've never done it for fun, really.
I can understand where you are with that, Blaze. I respectfully disagree. I fully understand where you're coming from with that. It's not genuine. It's and things like that. And there's a barrier there because it bothers me if someone emulates that for the purposes of making light of it or just having fun at your expense and things like that. So I can certainly see that angle. But at the same time, I personally look more to the empathy aspect of it. But the other piece with experience, fully, you took the words right out of my mouth with that. Not to paint with a broad brush, because there's always exceptions, but on the younger crowd, you see a little bit more of the over-the-top need to over emote, over express. It's just, you would see it in a young actor, you would see it in anyone, trying to find themselves from that perspective. Whereas you get to the age of a few of us, myself included, we just don't give a shit anymore. This is who we are. Suck it up and deal.
There's both a generation factor and just a basic age factor behind that shift in perspective over time, because when you're a teenager, it's all about ego. It's all about self-expression. That's all that matters. And then as age starts eating away your outer layers, you harden up and you kind of drop things that don't work. And over time, like you said, you end up just kind of not really caring as much.
Us Gen Xers, we gave up. we fought the battle, we lost.
Probably also a bit there to do with how new of a Therian you are. It's like, a new atheist, a new religious person. The one you can tell somebody that's just became X because they're more into it than anybody else in the group.
Yes.
Yeah, there's that initial enthusiasm, the burning hot fire. You gotta wait for it to kind of die down to embers before you get anywhere near it.
Yeah, they'll get broken of that soon enough.
Yeah.
Because Bear's there to break them.
Exactly.
If they really want to be broken, he'll take care of that too.
I'm gonna refrain from commenting.
Are you about ready to start the wrap-up process?
Wolfwing, is there anything else you want to tell us about yourself before we do any of that? Is there like a certain way someone should reach out to you if they want to get in contact with you? I think you said you're in the Therianthropy Discord server. Are there other places people can look for you, that kind of stuff?
Pretty much mostly just Discord right now. I'm on, where are we, obviously? Internet aviary for bird Therians. Therianthropy Discord. Recently found out about kinship species dysphoria server. It's all about, a place for those that have dysphoria. I guess I'm pretty simple, leopard, eagle, nothing too exciting.
Wolfwing, thank you for joining. And again, this is a topic that's kind of open-ended, I think, to some degree. Like, we're expecting it to branch out into additional conversations. If you're listening in and you have any ideas for, further topics we can take on this, or maybe further polls we can evaluate for this sort of thing, let us know, and we'll take it from there. All right, so I'm going to move on to community news now. First and foremost, we have a new Illinois HAL that is in the process of being set up. There is a link currently on Therian Guide. I'm going to put that, as usual, in our episode description. So if you are living in the state of Illinois or are able to travel there, the date is sometime in next spring. It's not set in stone yet. So still in the planning phases for the HAL. But if you are interested, check out that link. The host's name is Wolfthing, and I'll try to see if we can get extra contact information to reach out. But again, it's just another upstart HAL, so if you're interested, definitely reach out to them.
Are they going to look for the Beast of Bray Road, or is that Wisconsin?
I don't know. We have a few things that I don't think any of these events are going to be until November, but a few upcoming events to kind of keep your eyes out for, or ears out for, or even your woos out for. November is NaNoWriMo month, and Blaze, you're going to have to help me here if I forget it. National Novelist Writers Month is what I think it stands for.
Bing, 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 bing. Correct.
Okay, my cat brain actually succeeded in something.
Yeah, for all you creative Therians out there who enjoy writing, I always recommend giving the NaNoWriMo challenge a shot. The idea is to write 50,000 words only in the month of November. It doesn't have to necessarily be a novel. It can be 30,000 words of any kind of writing project you like, as long as it's original content. It doesn't have to be pretty. And another thing to point out is that you don't have to necessarily post it public. You can. NaNoWriMo has their own forum. But for the most part, you can't just log into somebody's name and look at all the stuff that they've written and posted it up there. It's not like that. I recommend absolutely anybody who is interested to go and check out the NaNoWriMo home site, sign up, and if you're interested in like writing in a team or being able to view each other's content, there are options available within the forum for being able to do that. So yeah, don't forget that November 1st to November 30th is National Novel Writers Month. I'll be going for year 4. I've won 3 years in a row now, and I'm going to be doing her again, even though will still be in college classes at that time. I'll fit it in somewhere.
You know, I think if I try it this year, it'll be like the 6th time that I've tried it, and I think I've gotten like 1,000 words at most. It's just cat brain,
You know what? My
always.
secret is to just not worry about it. You just break it down into a little chunk. Each day you need to average 1,667 words. And in my chicken scratch pencil writing, that's 2.5 pages. That's not much.
Yeah, I think I just not worry about it enough too much.
Every time that comes up and I decide to do it, I've been rewriting the same story like 6 times,
I feel that too, yeah.
which is a fictional autobiography about myself.
But one thing I do want to ask too, Blaze, and I'm not sure if you know this off the top of your head, but I think NaNoWriMo also used to have like an honor system where do you have to actually submit something to them to have a word count, or
No.
can you?
No. It's based on an honor system. You could technically cheat all the fuck you want, and they'll never catch you. But no, all it is it's like a daily counter.
Yeah, but the important thing there is too, like if you want to do the challenge and you're very private or you're concerned about your work, I don't think you even have to actually publish it on the site at all.
No,
Like,
absolutely not. There's absolutely no obligation to show anybody what you've actually written. You don't have to submit it to get credit for it or anything like that. It's just a fun challenge. At the end of it, if you get 50,000 words or more in 30 days, they give you a nice purple laurel to go around your name, and your title bar will show up purple to anyone who happens to look at your front page. You can upload an image for the cover of your book and all that, but you're not obligated to actually post or publish any of your written material.
so it's always good to kind of nudge community stuff there too. So hopefully, I'll try to poke around and see who else may be interested too, and like see if we can get a TG thread for people who want to join a group or something like that too. So I'll kind of keep that in my mind going forward. Since it's coming up on the month of November, we also have the infamous war between Wolfenute and Therianthropy Day. So,
Therianthropy Day.
no, I'm Team Wolfenute all the way. So,
What is Wolfenute? I keep hearing it mentioned.
It's a made-up holiday by a kid some years ago.
It's not made up.
To celebrate the wonderful species, and that's about the extent of it.
The origin story isn't even as concise as that. It's
called distillation. It's called distillation.
Misguided youth, corrupted by canines.
Yep, those darn canines.
How am I the only person that's supporting Wolfenute? That feels just really weird.
I'm supporting it just plenty, thank you very much.
Well, you do call yourself Orange Wolf.
No, yes I do. But
Honestly, I'm just against it on principle.
I think that's so many Therians are against it on principle because the one day it literally or the one year, I don't even remember if it was the first year that it happened. Like Wolfenute did fall on Therianthropy Day, and the two got
right. That's
the
exactly
two got
why.
Like confused somehow, and like I thought it was actually really funny, and so I want to say like
You made a Wolfenute cake.
I did. So
did.
like generalized
impressive.
backstory is that I think the kid was like 7 or 8 years old and made a holiday about how like it's people can celebrate the wolf spirit, and canines are supposed to get extra meat that day, and there's supposed to be a wolf cake or something like that. So I kind of I went along with it
back
and
in the day
vibed.
when getting a video to go viral was a really, really big deal. That's basically all it is. It's a video that went viral and then turned into a cyber legend.
Well, also a cash grab by the kid's parents.
Basically, yes.
I mean, it was super exploitive.
How is it any of this bad?
Now, see that I don't agree. I don't agree with that aspect of the Wolf and Newt holiday. But I mean, if any of y'all want to like make a cake, I know one year at TG, I actually did. I don't know if any of you would know the show on Netflix called Nailed It, but it's a baking show for people that don't know how to bake, basically. And so I did like a challenge for other people to kind of like try their best to emulate like this cake with the picture of a wolf howling at the moon, and like I don't know, it might be interesting to try that again this year just to see. I'm sure it's just horrible stuff, but as long as it's edible, it doesn't matter, right? And then Therianthropy Day is officially, Barry, you said it's
in November.
The first full moon in November. I don't know if there's only one full moon this year. Okay, so no idea what date that is, unfortunately. Does anybody know off the top of their head?
It'll be later in the months.
Looks like November 8th this year, the Beaver Moon.
So it's later in the early months.
Shut up.
So in the last few years, I know a few different content creators have posted like cool videos for Therianthropy Day. I don't know right now off the top of my head what anyone's doing for this year too, but kind of keep your eye out for different community events that may be correlated to Therianthropy Day. There's no is there really a focus for Therianthropy Day?
No.
I don't think you don't necessarily have to feel obligated to spread awareness about it, but it is an opportunity for that to be a thing too.
It's just a day to remember, to focus, to contemplate your Therianthropy.
A day to honor what Therianthropy is and what it means to you, basically.
I think, like, yeah, even if it's just an opportunity for you to go out in nature and just kind of vibe with your animal self, or hey, maybe even try to figure out a trip to your local zoo just to meet your stereotype in person or something like that too. These aren't things you have to do, of course, but just kind of food for thought.
Unrelated, there's also Whamageddon and Boobalivian in December.
Okay, I'm familiar with Whamageddon, but I don't know Boobalivian.
Boobalivian, you gotta listen to Wham. So there was a group of people who decided that it wasn't fair to force yourself to try to avoid Wham. So they decided they were going to try to avoid any song by Michael Bublé during that month. And he has like 40 Christmas songs that play on constant rotation. Almost impossible. It is far more difficult than Whamageddon. But his songs are worth avoiding. So it's a win for everyone.
Well, I'm going to point out that your pup loves to torture you and try to ruin your Whamageddon within the first day. So
he's blown me up in Whamageddon repeatedly. I'm hoping to do that again this year. It's always fun. But that's 2 months out.
Well, last Christmas, I gave you my heart.
I know, but the very next day you gave it away.
Actually, I thought you ate it.
Oh.
Nom.
Yeah, that's true.
So you did give it away eventually. It just took a while.
Oh, God.
Yes. Delightful.
The last thing I have for community news is also, I'm going to have Bear talk about that one because I haven't actually looked at it yet, but the video about furries, which includes fur science.
Yeah, PBS has a thing called Subcultured, which is a program where they examine different subcultures, shockingly enough. And they recently it's the 11th episode of the series called Why Are Furries Misunderstood? And some of our friends from Fur Science were on there, primarily Dr. Roberts. They interview a number of furries and such. Doesn't really get into otherkin and Therians other than the whole litter box debacle of misinformation that was floating around of late. I mean, it's a good 11-minute sort of introduction to furries and what is accurate and what isn't. Worth a watch.
For those of you who are listening in and not too familiar, give Fur Science some love. Like, check them out. They're on a bunch of different social media sites, and they actually do Therian and otherkin research.
Yep.
So one of their pages, they actually do have like open surveys for various things too. So if you want to help them do the science, give that a check. It's always good to kind of try to participate in stuff like that, help them get more accurate statistics for who's out there, as far as like if you're a furry, Therian, things like that too, and some of your personal experiences. So they're an awesome group. Give them some love.
The more awareness we can raise about actual research endeavors and scientific investigations, the better.
That's a good point, because one of the criticisms that gets raised is, well, there's no legitimate science about you.
Yeah, bah. I mean,
Like,
that's
I don't
exactly
know,
what-
there's
that's exactly
several
what-
hundred research papers.
This is exactly what we need to continue working on, is trying to find people who actually have this information and can speak about it intelligently without killing people with academic university terms that no one in the common public understands, right? There has to be a bridge between that academic investigation and how it's presented. So we do need to do more of that. Therians Through Time segment kind of has that going for it as one of the fundamental drives behind why we're doing that discussion, is to try and get more interest in actual academic and historical research about the Therian experience. So look for more of that on the horizon in the near future from us.
All right. Well, again, thank you to Wolfwing for coming on this episode, and thank you for everyone else who's hopped on too. Thank you all for listening to the episode of Where We Podcast. If you have any questions, if you'd like to submit feedback, if you'd like to possibly participate in a future episode, any of those things, feel free to email us at wherearewepodcast@gmail.com, or to any kind of feedback, criticism, even things like creativity submissions. Like last episode, we had an intro music submission from someone. If you want to try doing that yourself, get that a chance. And hopefully we will be recording again in the next few weeks, so we will catch you all then. Okay, thanks, bye.
Meow, 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 meow.